Colors in the Middle Ages, not a matter of preference, but of judgment. What determines our decision when choosing an outfit today? Most likely our personal taste, our mood, or perhaps fashion trends. We can easily go to a store and buy fabric in any color we want. But was it that simple 6 or 7 centuries ago in medieval Europe? Michel Pastoureau, the renowned French historian and authority on symbols and colors, answers no to this question based on his extensive research on the history of colors. Pastoureau reveals that in the Middle Ages, the color you wore was not just a preference, but an instant judgment about your economic power, social status, and even your moral stance. Colors were literally a language, and while the rich spoke this language, the poor listened. In the modern world, color is a free means of expression. In the Middle Ages, it was a deeply coded, rigidly regulated social necessity. Pastoureau's fundamental thesis is this. In the Middle Ages, the symbolic function of a color was determined by three main systems of interpretation accepted at the time. Cosmic interpretation, the relationship between color and the four elements, earth, water, air, fire, and the order of the universe. Physiological interpretation, the connection between colors and the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Theological interpretation, religious meanings representing virtue, sin, or characters from the Bible. This rigidity showed that the use of a color stemmed from social status and religious requirements rather than personal choice. As Pastoureau said, color issues are always social issues. Obtaining colors, precious paints more valuable than gold. While colored paints are easily obtained through industrial production in the modern world, obtaining a vivid and lasting color in the Middle Ages was one of the most difficult chemical processes and had costs that even the nobility could not afford. Vividness was the most critical factor directly determining the quality and, therefore, the price of a color. Here are the sources and difficulties in obtaining the most prestigious colors of that period. The liquid gold of royalty, purple true purple, or Tyrian purple, was obtained from a sea snail called murex, which lived in the Mediterranean Sea. Tens of thousands of snails had to be crushed to obtain just 1 gram of dye. This process was both foul-smelling and extremely slow. This dye could be worth 10 times its weight in gold, transforming it from a mere luxury into an economic fortune. Purple was a continuation of the monopoly tradition stretching from the Byzantine Empire to Rome. Pastoureau notes that this color was worn only by emperors, kings, and the highest-ranking clergy, stemming from its representation of divine power and nobility. Wearing purple was a declaration of being at the top, the color of God and the blue of princes. Achieving a vivid, unfading blue was as challenging as obtaining purple. The finest blue pigment was ultramarine, made by grinding lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone mined only in Afghanistan's Badakhshan region. Ultramarine was more expensive than gold throughout the Middle Ages, and was therefore the pinnacle of luxury. Painters used this expensive blue only for the most sacred figures, especially for Mary's robe. This choice is concrete evidence of how the color's cost reinforced its theological significance. The deadliest green and the lasting red. The risks of green. Green was relatively common since it was derived from plants, but it was often of poor quality and faded easily. Achieving more vibrant, lasting green tones required pigments containing toxic substances like arsenic, posing a deadly risk to painters. The prestige of red, especially carmine, derived from the cochineal insect, was the most prestigious color after blue. Red symbolized blood, power, and war, making it highly favored by kings and warrior nobles. Colors as social order, status, prohibitions, and symbolic shifts. In the Middle Ages, color was an identity card indicating an individual's place in society. This was not an arbitrary code, but a system that had to appear fixed and unchanging in order to maintain the social and religious order. Social perception and prestige. The rich, bright red and blue tones in a lord's clothing immediately signaled his right to rule and his wealth to afford these colors. On the other hand, Peasants and the poor had to wear dull and faded colors like gray, brown, and dirty yellow, obtained with cheap and easily accessible dyes. The rise of black. While black initially represented poverty, according to Pastoreau, it underwent a significant shift in meaning from the 14th century onwards. It was adopted by clergy and lawyers as a symbol of authority, seriousness, and moral virtue. This is perhaps why we think of people wearing dark suits when we think of today's business people. This transformation demonstrates how flexible the social meaning of color is and how closely it is tied to centers of power. A Pastoreau argues that defining color as a social phenomenon means that any change in color usage, such as a shift in preference from red to black, indicates large-scale shifts in social power or religious focus. The mark of yellow, the color of betrayal. Bright yellow was often associated with betrayal, lies, and exclusion. In Christianity, because Judas, who betrayed Jesus, wore yellow, yellow was forced to be worn as a sign of discrimination in some places during the Middle Ages by prostitutes or socially excluded groups, such as Jews. This obligation shows that colors carried not only wealth, but also moral judgment. Conclusion: the history of colors is the history of humanity. Michael Pastoreau shows us that in the Middle Ages, colors were far from being a matter of taste. On the contrary, they were the silent tools of power in a rigid social order. The difficulty of ensuring a color's vibrancy and durability determined its cost. The cost, in turn, determined who could wear it. This structure, contrary to today's free choice, stemmed from the social necessity or status requirement of color usage. Let us conclude with Pastoreau's own words. Man is not alone, he lives within society. Does individual choice, personal taste, truly exist? Everything we love or reject always passes through the gaze and judgment of others. So the next time you choose a color, consider not only your personal taste, but also whether that choice would have cost you a fortune or excluded you from society 600 years ago. The Middle Ages was a period when colors served power and money, not freedom.